Today we're talking about the biggest contributor to someone's downfall in jiu-jitsu. We'll be talking about what it is, how it exactly holds you back, and how you can flip that so it can become one of your greatest tools to see success. So without further gum bumping, let's jump in. All right, so what is this thing that holds people back in their jiu-jitsu journey? And if you guessed ego, you're absolutely right. The definition of ego, according to the Oxford Languages, is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And if we dig a little deeper into what self-esteem is, it's the confidence in one's own worth or abilities, which is really, really interesting. So I think it's pretty easy to see how one's ego can be their downfall, or if you play it right, a big part of their success. Mainly because having confidence in your own abilities in jiu-jitsu are going to be highly important, but not if you're letting this sense of ego get in the way of your progression. So how do we know if our ego is destroying our jiu-jitsu journey? Well, there's a couple landmarks that you can check on to make sure you're on the right track. I'm going to give you 5 reasons on why your ego may be ruining your BJJ journey, and then at the end, I'm going to give you a mindset trick to help flip that to see success. Reason number 1, your ego is preventing you from tapping when you should. Now, this one is near and dear to me because I have an elbow surgery coming up because I used to not tap to arm bars. Well, because of that, now both of my elbows have bone spurs in them, and recently one of the bone spurs broke off in my left elbow, and if it turns up on its side, I feel like I have an arrowhead stuck in my arm. Just from talking to you guys in the comments and my DMs on Instagram, I know that many of you already deal with bone spurs, whether that be from weightlifting or jiu-jitsu. So I really want to put that out. I think there's a lot of value there. Expect to see that soon. And while there is value in finding where your limits are and learning the escapes from submissions like arm bars, there's also a fine line where you're walking or leading with your ego. If you're consistently allowing your body to be injured just for the sake of avoiding a tap, especially in practice or training, you're leading with your ego. For the most part, we should be able to train jiu-jitsu without seeing any injuries. Obviously, we're gonna see some here and there. That's just the nature of the beast with the gentle art. But truly, if your arm is hyperextended and you don't have a way out and you know that you don't know the escape fully, it's okay to tap, reset, and start over again. And of course, there's some value in training with good people who aren't going to hyperextend your arm if they know you're not tapping. Just because I have the submission and they're not tapping, that doesn't mean I crank the submission. There's been plenty of times where I've let go to avoid hurting the other person because I knew they weren't gonna tap, or they were trying to set up the escape and failing. I'd rather be able to let go, restart, and teach them what's going on rather than hurt someone. So is there value in having a solid training partner who's not gonna hurt you? Yes, but at some point we do have to take responsibility for our own actions. I think it's easy to get caught up in the coolness of escaping an armbar when your arm is half broken, just because some of the high-level guys are able to pull this off. But you got to remember, a lot of these guys are paying their bills with jiu-jitsu, all right? If you're not using jiu-jitsu to pay your mortgage, your car payment, to save up for retirement, you do not need to put yourself at risk like this. You can still learn the escapes without hurting yourself. Sometimes we need to put our ego and our pride aside to get the most value possible. The next way your ego could be ruining your jiu-jitsu progress is it's preventing you from taking harder rolls. Now, don't get me wrong, there's value in taking rolls, especially as a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, from the white belts. And nothing against the white belts, I love my white belts, but it tends to be a role that you can focus more on your offensive abilities. It tends to be a slightly easier role, and there is tons of value there, don't get me wrong. But if your ego is preventing you from taking a harder role in training, that is a problem. Just as there's value in rolling with someone who's less skilled than you, there is so much value in rolling with someone who's more skilled than you. Some of the coolest tricks I know in jiu-jitsu came from rolling with better or more skilled grapplers. You got to remember that every time you tap, you're learning something. And for the most part, I've never met anyone who refused to show me how they did that. Whether that's a submission, a body lock, a transition, a reversal, I've never had anyone refuse to show me how they did that after the roll. For those of you who are blue belt and beyond, I want you to look back and remember your white belt years and all the value and the lessons you learned there. And guess what the life of a white belt is? It's constant losing, right? At least losing in the sense that you're tapping. You're winning in the sense that you're learning so much. As you progress up the belt system, I have noticed even in myself that there can be a hesitation to take on harder roles. Because as you ascend the belt system, there is a heightened sense of responsibility to perform well. But guess where this comes from? Your ego. I think it's totally normal to take a role from a belt who's higher ranking than you, especially if you know you're gonna get smashed. But I've said this so many times in previous videos, the higher belts may give you a harder butt whooping, but it's a safer butt whooping, and it's one that you can learn from. So if your ego is preventing you from taking these harder roles from a more skilled opponent or training partner, I highly recommend you get this in check, because there's so much to learn from better or more skilled practitioners. And if you're training at a school where the higher belts are gatekeeping these techniques, these submissions, some of their knowledge, I would probably look at going to a new school. All of the schools I've trained at and all of the people I've connected with, whether that was here or in Europe, it doesn't matter. Everyone was so willing to show me their secrets, and I was always able to learn something from the guys who are higher up the belt system than myself. So stop letting this scare you away from harder roles. I promise you that these lessons coming from the more skilled guys are a game changer. This next point goes out to all the beginners, the newbies, the white belts. You're going to lose a lot in the beginning, especially from people who are smaller and weaker than you. I look at jiu-jitsu as the great equalizer. At least from my experience, when I see guys coming in with a really big ego, it normally levels that out, it tapers it off. And the guys that come in with a very low sense of self-worth, low self-confidence, it normally raises that back up. It's the great equalizer. Where this can really ruin your BJJ journey is if you're someone with a bigger ego and you don't allow the journey to level that ego out. I'll never forget my first day at jiu-jitsu. I came in as a powerlifter with plenty of years of wrestling in my background. And I remember seeing all the people inside the mat room, thinking about how small and unathletic they looked. And I thought, I'm just gonna out wrestle everybody. This is gonna be easy. I'm gonna have a blue belt in no time. Well, I couldn't be more wrong. I got tapped out by a guy who was like 50 pounds less than me. He was choking me with my gi. I didn't know at the time it was a bow and arrow choke, but my mind was blown. And instead of letting that destroy me, I felt like I need to learn this power. I need to learn this magic, because imagine what I could do if I knew this stuff. So did I get my butt whooped by someone way smaller than me? Absolutely, but you can't let that stop you in your tracks. Trust me, there's great things coming to those who stay consistent for the long run in jiu-jitsu. And as long as you continue to look at it in that way, you're gonna see some amazing progress. I can tell you this, that if you get it in your mind that it's okay to suck at jiu-jitsu in the beginning, and you keep training, within a year, you will be better than the vast majority of the general public. And that is a beautiful and powerful thing. This next point goes out to all the blue belts and above. I feel that I can talk on this one because I personally dealt with this, and that is avoiding learning new techniques because you know you will suck at that new technique, at least for a short amount of time. Now, I can tell you that I've never avoided learning a new technique because of this, but I know in the back of my mind that I'm going to suck at it in the beginning, and it is a little daunting. For example, when I began my leg lock journey, I knew that I was going to be horrible at these for a certain amount of time, and it's still something I'm working on. I'm still not perfect at this, but I've gotten a lot better at leg locks, and they've helped evolve my game so much. And I can tell you that in the 7 years I've been training jiu-jitsu, I've seen plenty of guys give up on techniques way too early because they just feel they aren't good at it. For example, the other day I had a white belt tell me that cross-collar chokes don't work. Yet, we have world champions beating other world champions with cross-collar chokes. So it's not that the choke doesn't work, it's just that you're not good at it yet. You accept the fact that you're not great at this right now, you practice it, you practice it, you practice it some more, and then eventually you get better at it. You can't let that fear of sucking at a technique stop you from evolving. And although I think this is more common than many of us would like to admit, if you don't take this seriously and you don't address it, this can destroy a big portion of your jiu-jitsu journey. What makes this martial art so enjoyable for me, at least, is that there's so much to learn. It is such a deep body of water, that which is jiu-jitsu. And I feel that it's probably pretty impossible to learn everything because there's variations on variations on variations. Everybody has a different way of implementing moves, transitions, reversals, body locks. It's deep. It goes really deep, and that's what makes it fun, learning all this stuff. So you can't let the act of being bad at something because you're a beginner prevent you from moving forward. And at its foundation, that is the journey of jiu-jitsu. As a white belt, you're not great, and as a black belt, you're pretty great. How are you gonna get the black belt if you're so afraid of sucking at something that you don't learn new techniques? It's a part of the process. So get that out of your mind. It's It's a silly thought. It's a common thought, but it's kind of silly. So the sooner you get that out of your mind, the sooner you can progress to the next level. Sucking at new techniques is just a part of the process. It's not a big deal. And reason number 5 on how your ego could be ruining your jiu-jitsu journey is you're afraid to roll against new people because you're afraid of losing, whether that's competition or even open mats at other schools. You guys that have been training for a while know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've been training with one guy consistently for a long period of time, your sparring match can almost turn into a rehearsal dance. You know exactly what he's gonna do. He knows exactly what you're gonna do. Are you really benefiting from that? You guys are doing the same 5 to 10 moves to each other. He knows how I'm going to respond. I know how he's going to respond. There's no guessing or being creative in your movements now. It's a rehearsal, and there isn't a lot of value in that. So because of this, I like to go get rolls in at other schools during their open mats and see how I do against their guys. You're gonna wanna make sure that wherever you're getting your belt promotions at, that this school is okay with you cross-training, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but as long as they're cool with that, yeah, I would totally recommend going to other schools for their open mats and seeing how well you do against people of the same rank. But if your ego is preventing you from doing this, that's a problem. This is a great tactic to use if you don't want to compete or you're not ready to compete. You'll be in a new environment, which can be a little nerve-wracking. You'll be rolling against new people, which can be a little nerve-wracking. They're going to be using techniques that you may have never seen before, or at least haven't seen from this specific person. But if you're becoming so worried about losing against people you don't know, this is your ego talking, and you need to get that in check. One of the main reasons to do jiu-jitsu is for self-defense, to be able to protect yourself in the street. And for the most part, if you get attacked, I'm pretty confident in saying you're not going to know who this person is. Of course, are there situations where you're going to know who your attacker is? Obviously, yes. But for the most part, we see these interactions happening between people who don't know each other. So you can see there's a lot of value in going to a school during their open mat, dropping in, and getting rolls in with people who you don't know and who you haven't trained with. Cross-training at different schools is great for learning new techniques, applying these techniques against someone who you cannot predict what their next move is, and on top of that, you're gonna make some cool friendships along the way. So if you're not ready to compete, I highly recommend trying some cross-training. Don't let your ego prevent you from this. I know it can be a little daunting walking into a new school that you've never been to or you don't know anyone. A little tip that I use is when I walk into a new area, whether it be a competition or it's a new school where I don't know anybody, I just walk in pretending like I've done this 100,000 times before. I walk in like I'm not nervous, I'm not scared, I don't know anybody, I'm not looking at anybody. I walk in head held high. You act like you've done this 100 times before, and it's not a big deal. Once you get into the act of rolling, you're gonna feel at home, you're gonna feel comfortable, and you immediately begin to develop these relationships, these friendships with these people. So if I could give you any advice here, if your school is okay with you cross-training, I highly recommend it. The pros vastly outweigh the cons here, in my opinion. You're gonna learn so much, and a lot of that you can bring back to your school and teach to your guys, which is a win-win for everybody. At the end of the day, all these reasons have one thing in common, and that's when you allow your ego to prevent progress. I think having a strong sense of self-esteem and the confidence in your own abilities and self-worth is a great tool to use for progress, but when it becomes so strong that you're afraid of losing and you're not getting the lessons in that you need, that's where it becomes a problem. To some degree, I don't think that having an ego is all bad as long as you keep it tamed. If your ego is preventing you from getting better because you're afraid of losing, well, that's a problem. But it's important to have a strong sense of self-esteem and having confidence in your abilities. This is going to allow you to have the confidence to move forward, to learn, to be able to fight through that phase where you're not going to be great at new techniques, or be able to weather the storm where you're in a new school or a competition going against people who you can't predict their movements. Jiu-jitsu isn't about destroying your ego, it's about taming it, leveling it out, using it as a tool to see more progress. I think a lot of people demonize ego, and as long as it's not getting in the way of your journey, you're doing okay. I think it's very easy to demonize the idea of an ego because most people who display a strong ego are highly arrogant, they have a strong sense of self-perfection, and they're probably a little bit more confident than where they should be for their journey. And yes, I was that guy entering my first jiu-jitsu academy as a power lifter with many years of wrestling behind me. I came in with an overly strong ego thinking I was going to dominate everyone, and I was quickly reminded that that was not the case. And instead of letting my ego ruin that for me and just quitting right then and there, I allowed my ego to taper off, to calm down so that I could learn and be okay with not being great at this for a while. And I'm confident that if you can keep your ego in check, you have many successful years ahead of you in jiu-jitsu. So if you remember anything from this video, I want it to be this: let your ego fuel you, not lead you. And with that being said, guys, that's the video. I hope you got something out of it. We do have more jiu-jitsu, fitness, and athlete recipes on the way. So if you like that kind of thing, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you along for the ride. Also, you guys with knowledge in this area, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, guys. I know a lot of you are really knowledgeable, and I always appreciate you guys sharing that in the comments section. So if you have something to say, please drop it down below. And with that being said, you know how we like to end them. Eat plants, train hard, and feel good. I'll see you in the next one. All right, the internet says that a strong ego is an inflated feeling of pride in your superiority to others. Oof, yeah, we gotta fix that. Oh, you know, you know what fixes that? A bow and arrow chuck on day one. Ugh, yeah, that'll fix it.